Strange but true stories, tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. Dear old Mom, the first person you bond with on this planet after you're born. She's the most likely person to step in front of a charging moose to save you. She loves, nurtures, feeds, and cares for all your needs until you're old enough to take care of yourself, and then she still does it. Moms are tireless and strong and amazing. They are your biggest cheerleader and are there to pick you up when you're feeling low. But what if your mom was replaced by someone who looked like her, well, almost, but lacked her character traits and unique qualities? What if the woman who should be your mom is just a stand-in? This story, submitted to us by a viewer of Strange But True, tells a story like that. It was the summer of 1968, and my family and I lived about 5 miles outside Sandy, Oregon, which is a rural logging town about 20 or so miles southeast of Portland. I was 15 that summer, and we lived at the end of a dead-end road. Our nearest neighbor was a half a mile away. We were surrounded by trees and had a decent-sized farm. One evening, about dusk, I was sitting on the sofa watching TV. I can't remember what I was watching, but I started to get this feeling that I needed to go check outside. I had an expectation that I would see something I needed to see. So I got up, walked outside, and looked up. There, taking up half the visible sky, was a giant, circular, orange, glowing, donut-shaped craft, motionless over our house. In the donut hole of this craft was a darker brown-colored something that seemed to hang lower than the rest of the craft. It was completely silent, absolutely no noise coming from it at all. I had seen strange lights in the sky before. 2 years prior to this incident, I saw a series of lights that looked like bright stars zigzagging in the night sky. But my first thought on this particular night was that it was some sort of a blimp. But when it shot away a few moments later, I knew it wasn't anything as slow as a blimp. It was the fastest thing I had ever seen. It was gone in nearly a blink of an eye, but again, it made no sound as it flew away. I was fascinated by the idea of life on other planets. With this being the late 60s, science fiction culture was in full bloom. I was absolutely exhilarated to experience it. I went back inside and told my mom what I saw. She laughed at me and said it was probably the product of clouds and the setting sun. No way was I believing that. With the velocity it sped away, it was not my eyes playing a trick on me. But I let it drop. 3 days later, I got up, went to the kitchen to have breakfast just like I always did. My mother was standing at the sink washing dishes. Her back was towards me. I sat down at the table and started eating a bowl of cereal. A short time later, my mother turned around to say something to me. I looked up at her, and my mouth froze. I was stunned into silence. This wasn't my mom. It looked like her, sort of, but this one was heavier in the face, and she sounded just a little bit different. But most of all, she didn't feel like Mom. Something was terribly off about her. A very strange feeling came over me, like a state of panic, so I just went outside to get away from her and take time to figure out what was going on. Back then, my father was gone a lot due to his job, so I couldn't talk to him about this. My older brothers were also gone a lot and only came home a few times a week, and they were off at first light anyway. I watched this doppelganger pretend mother from a distance over the next several days. She seemed to behave like my mother for the most part, but there were little things that were out of the ordinary, and it was creepy. She did things that my real mother would never do. This other mother changed her eating patterns and ate different foods I had never seen her eat. There were personal behaviors and tendencies that I grew up seeing every day that were missing. We had a dog named Amber that was really my mom's dog. They were close until this doppelganger showed up at our house. When she would put out the food for Amber, the dog would get nervous and stand at a distance until she went back inside the house. Amber was incredibly perceptive, and at this point I knew something was up, and this was really not my mom. But it went from creepy to downright frightening a few days later. I was outside and I looked up to see her standing in the window. She motioned for me to meet her at the back door. When I did, she handed me a bag of garbage and told me to take it to the burn barrel. Then she said, in a matter-of-fact voice, "I'm going to kill you some night when you're sleeping." Then she turned and walked back in the house. I am serious. Just like she was talking about the weather, she tells me she's going to kill me in my sleep. My real mother had never said anything remotely close to that to anybody. I was more than a little freaked out, but I had no one to tell this issue to. We were so far away from anybody. There weren't any neighborhood kids to tell. There was a phone in the house, but I didn't know who to call. I didn't have a way to contact my dad. I was stuck. At this point, I decided to sleep in our barn, which had a flat top area in the back. I also didn't need another meal prepared by my mother or whoever this was that summer. I would sneak in the house at night and grab some packaged foodstuff and scrounge apples from the roadside fruit trees. Believe it or not, this situation went on for the rest of the summer until one morning, my real mom was back. It was obvious to me that it was her. Her mannerisms were back. I hugged her so tightly it surprised her. I even asked her, "Where you been?" She laughed and said, "In the house where I always am, silly boy." I tried to talk to her about this 6 months later. I fished around a bit, asking her different things, but she had no knowledge of anything that I was talking about. I don't know what happened that summer, and I will never forget it. Many years later, I heard other people tell similar stories and that these doppelgangers were alien replacements in order to observe us, and then the real people were returned. It sounds crazy, but it's as good an explanation as any I've heard. There may also be a connection with something else that happened near my home about 2 years before this incident. I talked earlier about seeing lights in the sky that were UFOs. In 1966, there were some horrible animal mutilations in the woods near our house. One of our dogs was killed by what looked like being squeezed in the middle and having its insides pushed out both ends. Gruesome, I know. One of our far-off neighbors had a yearling white-faced bull that had been mutilated. He found the head and shoulders of it, but never the lower half. We moved away from the farm in 1970, but I have always wondered what happened while we lived on that seemingly peaceful farm in Oregon. This has been another strange but true story sent to us by a viewer just like you. Do you have a strange story that you can't share with anybody you know because they'll look at you weird or think you've plunged off the deep end? We won't judge. In fact, the stranger, the better. Send it to strangebutTrueStories2@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this video in the comments below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, sign up for notifications so you know the precise moment when the next SBT video drops on YouTube. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve White. Until next time.